Talk about a young woman, just like any other, who unknowingly steps into a world of deceit, power, and danger. Follow the twisted journey of a woman who never realized she was part of something much bigger than herself until it was too late because of stupidly trusting a man. But also, it wasn't her fault. We wouldn't blame her in this kind of situation. Emily had always lived a simple life, rooted in the routines of her small town. She worked as a cashier in a local convenience store, spending most of her days stocking shelves and ringing up customers. The momentum of her life was comforting, and she had grown accustomed to the predictable of her surroundings. Her small apartment, though modest, was her sanctuary. She spent her evenings reading books or volunteering at the local shelter, a place where she felt she could make a small difference. But everything changed the day she met Tony. He walked into the store one late afternoon, tall, confident, with a smile that immediately stole her heart. He seemed like a man who had figured out everything. Successful, charming, with a story that intrigues her interest. Emily didn't know it then, but the stranger who seemed so out of place in her quiet world was the disaster that would pull her into something far more dangerous than she could have imagined. Tony's charisma was magnetic, and over the next few weeks, their conversation grew more casual, exchange to more personal talks. He told her stories about his glamorous life, about business ventures and places he had traveled. He offered to help her get out of the rut she felt stuck in. He talked about connections, opportunity, and how people like Emily could achieve so much more if they just took a chance. For someone like Emily, she had always dreamed of a life beyond the confines of her town. Tony's offer seemed like a golden opportunity. At first, it was little things like picking up a package from a friend, running a small errand. Tony reassured her it was nothing illegal, just favors between friends. She didn't question it, trusting him more and more with each passing day. What Emily didn't know was that her decision to help Tony would set in motion a chain of events that would pull her into a web of crime, deception, and danger. And she would have no idea what she was getting into until it was far too late. The first task was very simple. Tony asked Emily to pick up a small package from a man named Carlos, who she had never met, and deliver it to another address across town. Emily hesitated at first, unsure of why Tony couldn't do it himself, but he reassured her with a smile, claiming that it was just a small favor that would help him out. Feeling the pressure of wanting to prove herself capable and wanting to impress Tony, she agreed. When she met Carlos, he was a gruff man who barely acknowledged her, handing over the package with a curt nod. The entire exchange seemed unremarkable, and Emily convinced herself it was just another mundane task. After all, she had no reason to doubt Tony's intention, or so she thought. As Emily walked across town to deliver the package, she had no idea that this small errand was part of a much larger and more sinister operation, one that involved drug trafficking, money laundering, and criminal networks far beyond the reach of the small town she knew so well. Upon delivering the package, the weight of the situation hit her when she noticed the suspicious glances exchanged between the men involved in this transaction. There was something about the way they spoke, the hurried whispers, the palpable tension in the air that made Emily uneasy. But she shrugged it off, telling herself that she was just being paranoid. Tony would explain everything, she thought. He had always had a way of making her feel safe, like she was part of something important. But as the days went by, Emily's involvement in Tony's life deepened. Small favors became bigger tasks, and with each task, she found herself increasingly entangled in a world she didn't understand. Each time she asked Tony what she was really helping with, he always smiled and reassured her that it was all above board. that everything would make sense in time. But the truth was, the more Emily trusted Tony, the more she became part of an underworld that she would soon be unable to escape. Over the next few months, Emily's life seemed to transform overnight. Tony showered her with gifts like designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and dinners at exclusive restaurants. He introduced her to high-powered individuals who seemed to live effortlessly luxurious life. Emily felt like she was finally getting the life she had dreamed of, and Tony made her believe that she deserved it. He promised her that with a little more work, she could have everything she ever wanted: freedom from her mundane life, financial security, and the power that came with being connected to the right people. But as Emily started to get used to her new life, she also began to notice things that made her uncomfortable. Tony's friends were always looking strange, like distant, calculating, and sometimes even a little dangerous looking. She didn't feel comfortable around them, but Tony always had a way to smooth things over, making her feel at ease, convincing her that she was part of something bigger. She had never felt more alive, but a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Despite her growing discomfort, Emily found herself caught in the life Tony promised her. She started to question herself. After all, these people were offering her everything she had ever wanted. How could it be wrong? They were kind to her, they respected her, and Tony made her feel special. But slowly, the cracks started to show. Late night meeting, whisper conversations, and a growing tension in the air that made her realize that Tony's world was not as glamorous as it seems. She overheard one conversation that made her blood run cold. Words like shipment, deal, and supply were thrown around casually. It wasn't until one night, until when she found Tony making an exchange with a stranger in the back of a van, that the truth began to hit her. The package wasn't filled with clothes or trinkets as she had assumed, but drugs. The reality of what she had been helping with finally sunk in. She had unwittingly become part of a much larger, dangerous world of crime and drug trafficking. Emily's world tilted as she finally confronted Tony about what she had seen. He didn't deny it. Instead, he calmly explained that the world they lived in was complex, and sometimes people had to do things they didn't fully understand in order to survive. He made it clear that she wasn't just helping with a few deliveries. She had unknowingly become part of a global operation. Tony reassured her that she wasn't in danger, not as long as she continued to work with him, but Emily couldn't ignore the nagging feeling of betrayal that twisted in her guts. How had she allowed herself to be pulled in this? And more importantly, could she get out? Tony promised her that things would calm down soon, that this was just a phase, but deep down, Emily knew that her life would never be the same. The weight of her involvement pressed down on her, making her realize just how much she had lost. What had started as a simple errand had spiraled into something far more dangerous, and now she had no idea how to free herself from the grip of the world she never wanted to be part of. But with each passing day, Emily's connection to the operation grew deeper. Tony relied on her more and more, and the tasks became harder to ignore. She was moving products now, not just picking up and delivering parcels. The stakes were higher, and she could feel the tension in the air every time she made a delivery. The people she was working with weren't just criminals, they were ruthless. They didn't hesitate to silence those who got in their way. Emily was beginning to see the real danger in Tony's world, but it was too late to back out now. She had already crossed the line, and the consequences of trying to escape were too great. As much as she wanted to, she knew that walking away could be a death sentence. It was a trap, and Emily was now part of it, with no easy way to leave. The more Emily tried to distance herself from the operation, the more tangled she became in its intricate web. She started to notice the subtle changes in Tony's behavior. The once caring and supporting man who had promised her a better life was now cold and distant, speaking in ridicules and offering cryptic reassurance. Every task she completed felt heavier, and the stakes seemed to rise with each passing day. The people she had once thought of as colleagues now appeared to be dangerous criminals, each with their own agenda. The group was well organized, operating like a family tuned machine, but it was clear that she was simply another cog in the system. There was no moral compass or lines she could safely cross. Every favor she did for Tony and his associates was another step deeper into the underworld. One evening, Emily was tasked with delivering a particularly large package to a warehouse on the outskirts of town. She had become accustomed to these errands, but something about this one felt different. When she arrived, the scene was unsettling. The warehouse was dark and quiet, the thick air with tension. She had expected to meet someone to hand over the goods, but instead she was greeted by unfamiliar faces. Men who didn't bother to hide their disdain for her presence. They spoke in sharp, clipped tone, and Emily felt her heart race as she handed over the package. As she turned to leave, one of the men grabbed her, pulling her back. You should be careful, girl, he muttered. People like you don't last long in this game. His words echoed in her mind as she hurried out of the warehouse, and for the first time, Emily fully realized the danger she was in. She was in over her head, but the realization came too late. She was already part of something much bigger and darker than she could ever escape. The deeper Emily became involved, the more isolated she felt. Every time she tried to question Tony, he skillfully deflected, assuring her that everything was under control. But it wasn't long before the truth became impossible to ignore. One evening, after a particularly stressful exchange, Emily overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. Tony wasn't just involved in the operation, he was running it. The men she had been helping, the deals she had been facilitating, were all parts of a vast global drug network that extended far beyond her town. The horrifying realization struck her. She hadn't just been helping Tony, she had been unknowingly working for the masterminds behind the operation. What she had thought were minor, inconsequential tasks were actually critical pieces in a network of criminal activity spanning continents. As the truth began to sink in, Emily's paranoia grew. She was trapped, unable to escape without serious consequences. Tony's charm and manipulation had worked. He had convinced her that she was helping in ways that were harmless, that her small actions were part of a much bigger noble cause. But now, faced with the horrifying truth, Emily found herself questioning everything. She was a pawn, caught in a game that she didn't understand, with no way to withdraw without risking her life. As the web tightened around her, Emily began to see the true nature of those she had been working with. Their smiles were maxes for cold, calculating faces. The people she thought she could trust were nothing more than dangerous players in the game of power and manipulation. And as the war was closing, Emily realized that she only chance to survive might be to play the game herself, but that meant embracing the very darkness she had once hoped to escape. Emily's world was unraveling. The promises Tony had made her, the life of luxury, the sense of belonging, the security, were now a cruel joke. She had been so blinded by her desire for a better life that she hadn't seen the price she would pay. Now, she was too deep into the operation to get out. Every day she stayed involved. The weight of her decision became heavier. She couldn't ignore the reality any longer. The operation was a global network of drug trafficking, money laundering, and violence. People who tried to back out were disposed of quickly, and Emily was no exception. Her fear grew as she realized that every moment she spent working for Tony, every task she completed made her an accomplice in something far more sinister than she could have ever imagined. The simple, quiet life she once led felt like a distant memory, a life she would never be able to return to. Desperate, Emily tried to make contact with law enforcement, but it became clear that they had been aware of the operation for some time. The police weren't just concerned with